For decades, one woman has been dubbed the Iron Queen of Oceania. Her wealth looms over Australia, but the tale of how that empire was created is not one of straightforward fortune. Some claim it was created through inheritance, others hint at wars that never made the news. Whatever the truth, her dynasty is rumored to have secrets that crafted more than a mere name. If power is costly, then this empire has paid dearly in terms most ordinary people can never imagine. The origin of this tale can be traced back to a man whose finding transformed a nation's future. A rise to untold wealth followed, with conflicts that left indelible scars within the dynasty. Had those ever occurred, maybe the fortune today would have been different. Yet here we are with questions that remain unanswered and a legacy that grows in silence. If you are ready to enter the secret world of this empire, then stay with us. Subscribe to the channel just like the video, and turn on the bell so you will not miss the truths that are to come. Let us start with the woman who was the Iron Queen of Oceania. Gina Hope Rinehart was born in Perth in 1954, but her upbringing was forged in the huge Pilbara region, the country that would one day power her wealth. She spent a period studying at Sydney University, but decided to step away and assist her father, Hancock, whose iron ore discovery had already altered the destiny of Australia. When he died in 1992, Gina took over as his heir, and thus the burden of the empire fell on her shoulders alone. She might have stumbled, but instead she turned Hancock Prospecting into an international behemoth, fluctuating with the mining boom but never losing its position at the pinnacle as Australia's richest individual. But with the ascension of the Iron Queen came personal turmoil. She married at only 19 and bore her first 2 children from this marriage. This relationship did not last long, and thus she again had to rebuild her life. There was a second marriage, that to corporate attorney Frank Rinehart, an unassumingly distinguished man, but fate again when he died suddenly in 1990 and left her alone in the world with their preteen daughters. What ensued was no less stormy. A vitriolic court fight with her stepmother dragged on for over a decade, ravaging the family after her father died. And even in her own home, changing allegiances, shattered bonds, and disputed positions in the empire forged cracks that have never been mended. If money can create dynasties, it can also strain the very fibers of family. And in Gina Rinehart's narrative, those trials would prove as indelible as the wealth. And yet Gina Rinehart's story is not just one of family wars, but of how she built a crumbling legacy into a mining empire that shook the earth. When her father passed away in 1992, Hancock Prospecting's future was uncertain. It had huge leases but minimal production, and without a dream, it could have disappeared into history. Gina took over as executive chairwoman, and hence the future of the dynasty lay solely on her shoulders. Her first bold stroke was the Roy Hill tenements, won just months after her father's death. Had she waited, competitors could have staked the land, but she persisted, bringing in partners and investment, and transformed desert leases into one of Australia's richest iron ore projects. Hope Downs followed, a Rio Tinto joint venture that continues to yield tens of millions of tons annually. But Gina didn't stop at iron. She made daring investments in coal ventures, manganese enterprises, and then in the farm field, purchasing iconic cattle stations such as Fossil Downs and Liveringa. The empire reached from red desert mines to green paddocks, a mix of risk and reward that took her wealth far beyond the foundations laid by her father. Her ambitions also extended to the media. In 2010, she invaded 10 Network Holdings and Fairfax Media boardrooms. For an instant, it looked like she might influence the tone of Australia's media, but editorial control rows compelled her to step back. If the risk had paid off, her influence could have reached beyond the mines to the country's headlines. Even today, she keeps on moving. In 2024, she acquired stakes in rare earth producers, a sector crucial to the future and controlled by global powers. The Iron Queen might have inherited her crown, but she never stopped struggling to maintain it. But business power does tend to bleed into politics, and Gina Rinehart never remained quiet. Early on, she financed her father's vision of Western Australia seceding from the rest of the country, even funding movements that sought libertarian notions. But years on, her voice went much farther. She battled against climate policy and mining taxes, established a lobby group to advocate northern development, and even sponsored infamous climate change deniers. If their message was embraced, she contended, then Australia had the potential to unleash prosperity through reduced costs and fewer regulations. Her views were frequently met with criticism, though. She once called on Australians to work longer and spend less time socializing, comments that were deemed very severe by critics. In a video address, she likened the pay in Africa to Australia, cautioning that Australia's competitiveness was eroding. So when political leaders reacted, they presented her comments as unrealistic for everyday workers. Controversies trailed her well beyond economics. Her father's outrageous comments about Indigenous Australians returned to haunt her in 2022, and when she declined to apologize, a top sponsorship agreement with Netball Australia fell over. Recently, she complained about an unfavorable portrait by Indigenous artist Vincent Namatjira, causing another cultural firestorm. Her influence is not limited overseas either. Through her business Northback Holdings, she got caught up in Canada's Grassy Mountain Coal Project, a development thwarted due to environmental issues. Should the courts rule in her favor, the project could be restarted, but at present it remains a battlefield between conservation and industry. Admirers regard her as an advocate of free markets and opportunity, but detractors blame her for ignoring environmental and social facts. And thus, the Iron Queen's legacy is as polarizing in politics as it is dominating in business. And then the trust, a construct designed to protect wealth but set to unleash one of the most ferocious wars within the Rinehart family. Lang Hancock created the Hope Margaret Hancock Trust in 1988, making Gina trustee and her 4 children beneficiaries. With nearly a quarter of Hancock Prospecting, its worth skyrocketed into the billions, and thus control over it held incredible influence. When the youngest daughter, Gina, came of age at 25 in 2011, the trust was meant to flow easily into the hands of its beneficiaries. But this became a war zone. Hope, the eldest child, headed to court, joined shortly by John and Bianca, all set to take on their mother. Gina struggled to keep things private, applying for suppression orders, but the courts tore away the cover, laying bare cracks that could no longer be concealed. She relinquished by 2013, but not in defeat. 2 years on, the decision was absolute. Bianca became the new trustee. A legacy founded to bring the family together had instead torn it apart, and the scars it left still have long shadows. And just when the saga of Gina Rinehart appeared to be characterized by struggles of family, power, and politics, another question lingered on. How much was the Iron Queen really worth? The response was never easy, because her fortune went up and down with the capricious waves of iron ore and international demand. But it was not just the figures that drew people in, but also the manner in which she weathered the storms that accompanied them. Her entry into the wealthy list started in 1992, exactly when her father died and left his empire to her. Initially, her name figured humbly among Australia's rich, but that was a soft entry that quickly turned into a thunder. She had entered the Billionaire Club by 2006, and thus her reach extended further. She was no longer limited to the Pilbara mines. Instead, she made aggressive forays into media, buying stakes in Fairfax and 10 Network, signaling she didn't just want money, she wanted a voice. The figures that followed were more like the script of a drama than a balance sheet. In 2007, her wealth was $1 billion. Within 1 year, it had grown more than twofold to over $2 billion. By 2011, she was worth $9 billion, and in 2012, she reached $18 billion, temporarily the richest woman in the world. But if the fortunes can rise so steeply, they can also fall. The decline in iron ore prices and weaker Australian dollar took its toll. By 2016, she fell from number 1 to number 4 among her nation's richest, her fortune dwindling to about $6 billion. If she had conceded at that point, the empire could have crumbled, but no, she rebuilt with dogged persistence. The Roy Hill project materialized, China exports boomed, and her fortune started rising yet again. By 2020, she regained the number 1 position with $28 billion, and in 2025, her wealth was valued at $38 billion, cementing her status as Australia's richest all over again. Her tale confirms that money is never simply a matter of figures. It is a question of perseverance, planning, and timing. But there remains one question. If markets again turn in her direction, might Gina Rinehart rise even further into the ranks of the great titans of world wealth? For one whose name is so inextricably linked with power, riches, and scandal, another side of Gina Rinehart is less frequently in the headlines. Behind the beam of mining dynasties and billion-dollar deals is a softer tale, one constructed on philanthropy. But this aspect of her life is not showcased with the same pomp and circumstance as her wealth. She prefers, as she once revealed, to step cautiously in giving, partially because public charity tends to draw unlimited requests, and partially because she treasures privacy in a world in which every move of hers is under the microscope. Even so, glimpses of her path of philanthropy reveal flashes of profound impact. In Cambodia, away from the iron-rich topsoil of Western Australia, she was spotted walking around girls' orphanages, bringing not just financial support, but herself. She also became a member of the advisory board of SISHA, a non-profit organization that works to dismantle the atrocities of human trafficking. It was through this that she focused attention and money on some of the most marginalized women and children, those abused in ways too horrific for most to contemplate. It was another facet of the Iron Queen that stood in complete opposition to her persona as a merciless businesswoman. But philanthropy for Rinehart has never been about far-off causes. Domestically, she discovered a potent means in sport. In 2012, Swimming Australia launched a $10 million alliance with the Georgina Hope Foundation and Hancock Prospecting. It was not simply sponsorship, it was a lifeline for the Australian swim squad, giving direct assistance to top-level swimmers and aspiring athletes who coveted gold. Even sports normally ignored, such as synchronized swimming, were boosted by her support. And that's why Rinehart was welcomed not as an outsider, but as one of the swimming family themselves. The association was renewed in 2015, evidence that her allegiance was not a casual gesture, but a continued vow. By 2019, swimmers talked about her not merely as a patron, but as a member, one who shared in the wins with them and bore the setbacks as well. Such donations inevitably attracted attention. In 2013, Bond University conferred an honorary doctorate on her, commending her for leading the Australian economy and her generosity in providing support beyond the business sector. The recognition was not merely of wealth creation, but of the ripple effect generated by her investments and ventures on society. Almost a decade later, in 2022, she became an Officer of the Order of Australia. The award acknowledged her contribution to mining, her charitable pledges, and her love of sport. If you like this ride, give some love by liking the video, subscribing, and ringing the bell so you never miss what comes next. Share it with a friend who loves stories of power and leave your comment below because your voice brings this story to life.